Greetings of peace and love, paradise, bliss, happiness. My name is Ram Hotep Ale. I'll be your master of ceremony, broadcasting on behalf of the number 13 signs astrology.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Man, my goal is just it's so broad. The things I want to do, as far as in this life and in this incarnation, it's very broad. And a lot of people don't like that because they want you to have these in-depth, intricate, precise goals. Like I just want to learn. Like how come I can't just say I'm here to learn, or I'm here to learn and then share what I know? Let's just say I'm here to search, share, and like. That's what I'm here to do. Search, share, and like. That's my mission in life. And in the course of me doing that, I believe that can turn into something really powerful, something really strong. I believe that can turn into a nation. I believe that can turn into an empire or a kingdom of people that are here with one common interest. Because that's all a nation is. A nation is just a group of people that are here for one common goal or for one common interest that all agree upon a thing, and they choose to act under a certain tree or a certain vine. A nation's standard or its flag represents its very essence, or the tree that represents it, type of thing. That's what the flag or the standard represents. So it's important that you know your flag and that you represent your flag. And if you have a bloodline where it's a lot of different mixed cultures or mixed bloodlines, you got different nationalities in you, you should represent all the flags that connect to your blood. Because in this world, blood is everything. The more you know about your lineage and your blood, the more you will get in this world. Because it's all predicated upon the bloodline, all of it. And so all of this stuff is very relevant. Now, when you talk about the Americas, because people they get it confused, and they see me up here and I say certain things, and I may say things about people that you may consider an American. But you got to remember, American is one that can trace their ancestry back to either the 13 colonies or even past that to the indigenous times when we were in territories. So people that can trace their ancestry back that far, you would be considered an American. But if you can't trace your ancestry back, whether you are related to those people or not, if you have no way of tracing yourself back to that, then how can you really call yourself an American? So then when I start talking about people being corporate fictions, yet and still they may consider themselves Americans, people think I'm trying to be funny or get on people. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm here to represent the culture of America and to bring back what America truly is. And right now, when I call myself American, it's almost like I'm using a foreign freaking term. Like when I say I'm an American, that's like foreign to a lot of United States citizens. Yeah, they say they're Americans, but then when you start like I'm American and I do this and I do that and I believe in this and I believe in that, and they think it's far out. If I say I'm an American, I believe in aliens, and I'm an American and I believe in recreational use of medicinal drugs at different times so that you can experience higher dimensions. If I say things like that, people, they ridicule you right in your own land and in your own country because they don't pay homage to the natives, the Native Americans. See, the Native Americans believed in aliens and things of that nature. So that's why people are confused. You really don't know what an American is. So what I want to do in this episode very shortly and briefly is kind of walk you into the original Americans and their culture. Now, we could say the original Americans were, a lot of people, we throw around the term Moor. And we say, when you call yourself a Moor, that means you are probably tracing yourself back to the ancestry of an original American. And you can say that to a certain extent, but to understand the history of America, it goes back further than what you can find when you begin to research the term Moor. Because when you begin to research the term Moor, you're not going to find a lot of information about pre-American history or pre-Columbian history, is what it would be called. Pre-Christopher Columbus, who actually his name was not even Christopher Columbus. That was the name that was given to him because he was a part of the Order of Columbus, the Knights of Columbus, and they gave him the last name Columbus. I just need to throw that out there to you guys. I believe his name was Christopher Addicks or something like that, but it definitely was not Columbus. a little rusty on that research. But so pre-Columbian history, which goes into a whole think tank, a group of people that came over here and began to write history and paint a picture of history predicated upon the way that they wanted to see it play out. And that's fine because a lot of what they talked about is very factual. But when you start to study the ancient Native American peoples that was on this land and the ancient cultures, you can get a lot more information to couple with the information from the Knights of Columbus and those different think tanks that came from Europe here to write the history of what was going on here. So you got to remember, a lot of the information that we research about America comes from European sources. Even when you say Moors, that's why I'm bringing this up. Even when you say Moors, that's coming from a European source because Moors came from where? Europe to the Americas. So I'm going to break down to you, that's one group of melanated people that may have came to this land, which is Moors, but it goes back further than them. You have to go back to a group of people called the Olmecs. The Olmecs. Some people call them the Olmecs. And when you research the Olmecs, then you'll get into some of the original people that came to this land. The Olmecs came to this land long before the Moors. When you read about the Indians leaving India and coming to America, a lot of this history is mixed up with the Olmecs or the Olmecs coming to America, which what was called at that time Atlan. Atlan. That's what America used to be called. You know it as Atlantis. During the times when the Olmecs came here, it was called Atlan, which means a vacation land, a home away from home, because what they don't tell you is that the Olmecs, they call them the rubber people, and that's the very secret pertaining to the Olmecs. And what a lot of the history tellers, they wrote this out purposely. What do you need to make rubber? I know a lot of people already know one of the key things you need to make rubber is oil. So to make rubber, you need some type of oil, or to make plastic or something like that, you need some type of oil. So when you talk about them getting to the point of being able to make rubber, this means that they knew about the alchemical effects of oil. Now, they may not have used the same process that we use to make rubber now, but we know that in order for, if this group was called the rubber people, we know that they knew something about alchemy, point blank. So that's telling you that when they came over here, they didn't just come over here as savages, as barbarians. They were sophisticated, they were very civilized, they had a lot of knowledge. And they left a lot of proof predicated upon their knowledge. One of the things that they left as far as proof predicated upon their knowledge was these heads. They're called the colossal heads, or the rubber heads, or the Olmec heads, or the Olmeca heads, and there's 17 of them that they left, mostly in Mexico. Because when you research the Olmec people, they were all over America. They were all over North America and South America, but most of their history, their capital was in Mexico. Did you know that Mexico is the largest city in the world? The largest city in the world. Real talk. So, and Mexico is very important when you understand pre-Columbian history. You have to go to Mexico to really research that. I've been once, and I need to really go back. But you have to go to Mexico to really get into that type of research and understanding pre-American history, or pre-Columbian history, and understanding the group of people that came here, because the Olmecs, they got the land mandates directly from Africa, because this land was a vacation land. In order to make this your land, you had to get a mandate, or like a land grant to live here, and you had to get that land grant or mandate from Morocco at the time. It's called Morocco now, but at that time it wasn't called Morocco. This is when you get into understanding the Moorish Empire. You have to understand how it was broken up, and before it was called Morocco. So when you see that flag, I have the Moorish flag on my website. You check out thirdsaintScienceAstrology.com if you want to look at the Moorish flag. And when you go look at the Moorish flag, you're going to think that's the Moroccan flag, but it's not. The Moroccans didn't start using it until later on, like in 1920 something, or maybe even 1940 something. Noble Drew Ali even was flying that flag before that, and even before that, people were flying that flag. That flag was vaulted. It was put in a vault, and a lot of Master Masons and Master Moors know this. And that flag was put into a vault because that's the flag when they say that, I think it was Christopher Columbus chopped down a cherry tree. They're talking about that red flag with the green star in the center. That's the starseed. I call it the starseed flag. because that's what it really is. Like, we go back, we could call it the Moorish flag, but it's older than even the term Moor. That flag itself goes back past the term Moor. That flag goes back to Atlantis. It goes back past Egypt, because our land here in Americas go back to Atlantis. We're Atlanteans. I'm going to do a video about the differences between Atlantis and Egypt, so I'm not going to talk too much about that here, but I just want to point that out. So these Olmecs, these were the group of people that you got to pay homage to, and they got their land. They were given their land through mandates, and other beings that came over here, like the Indians, they sent a group of people over here. They sent a group of the untouchables, was what you call them now. A group of the untouchables came over here and settled here in the Americas. We had a group of our fellow brothers and sisters from China that came to settle here on this particular land after the Olmecs, and back then, see, in order to settle on land, you had to basically agree to mix in with that tribe over here. See, it wasn't like over in the East. Over here, this is where you get the term about Atlanta being the land, not Atlanta, excuse me, but about America being the land of the free and home of the brave. This goes back further than when Christopher Columbus and the Pilgrims and the Moors and all them people came over here. This goes back all the way to the time when the Olmecs was here, because when the Olmecs came here, they came here as a vacation land. This was like a free land that nobody had jurisdiction over. The only thing you had to do is get a written grant from over in Africa, because Africa controlled all the lands. So you had to get a grant from over in Africa, over in Morocco, because Egypt controlled the land in the East. Like, Egypt controlled the land like in India and all. You had to get land mandates from Egypt to get land settlements over in the eastern part of the world. But on the western part of the world, you had to go to Morocco. You had to go to the Ashanti Empire. And the Gold Coast, which is in West Africa. You have to go along all of that, start from Morocco all the way down to West Africa, down to Senegal and all that, and Guinea and all of that. So you have to go around that part to get a land mandate. So they got this land mandate. The Olmecs had it, and after that, the Indians got a land mandate. So people was getting land, and they were just giving it out because it was like all kind of land here. So, but the thing is that when you came here, you had to agree to mix in, because over there you couldn't mix in, but over here they had a rule. It was different. And it's a reason for that. That goes into the Inky and Enlil thing. It goes back even further than the Olmecs, because actually Inky was the first person to come over here. When you understand who Inky was. Inky was the first person to settle over here, because even when you research Olmec history, yeah, they were the originals, but it was even people here before the Olmecs, but they don't never talk about them, and those were the actual ETs, the extraterrestrials, that was over here even before the West Africans came over here, because they wasn't the first. The Olmecs wasn't the first. You had ETs that was living in the center of the earth, and they had tunnels that they built going back and forth from Mexico all the way to California. They had tunnels you could just go, and they still got these tunnels to this day. The Mexican military uses these tunnels to sneak in soldiers and things of that nature. So you got a lot going on or whatever, like as far as over here, a lot of secrets and stuff that they don't tell you about, because you had a lot of groups coming over here for a long time. So the Olmecs, they're very important, because this is when you start talking about Homo sapiens getting over here. They're some of the first Homo sapiens to get over here. And what were they responsible for? They were known for competition. This is what makes them interesting, because the Olmecs, they competed. They had these colossal heads, but did you know that those heads were actual like athletes? These were like their gods. And these heads, these guys, they wore helmets. These colossal heads, they wore these helmets or whatever, and these were their gods. Like, these were they looked up to these particular individuals with these colossal heads, with these broad features, because these were the gladiators. So this is where America, you notice that America is real big on sports. They say sport and play. They say Americans do a lot of sport and play. And America's big on art and entertainment, if you notice. It's like the GNP. Like Americans, for the most part, don't really like working hard. They're more artistic and more, they'll compete hard. They only work hard when it's competition driving them. So this is why capitalism came into play over here, because this goes back to the Olmecs. They were competitors. They were the reason why these West Africans even got over here is because they didn't even like the Africans. See, they don't talk about that. See, a lot of black people, they want to say, oh, I'm African American, I'm this, I'm that. But then on the low, you don't even like Africans. I'm talking about if you go into a black American, an African American's home, and you start speaking with them about Africans, a lot of them, they don't even like Africans. They ain't going to tell you this publicly, but on the low, they talk about Africans stink, they smell funny, they eat funny, they food funny. They don't like Africans because it's a different bloodline, because your ancestors, you got to know about your ancestors. Most of you that came over here, if you were here pre-Columbian times, probably came via the Olmecs. And if you came over here, you wanted to leave Africa. You wanted to leave the control over in Africa. You want to leave that and come over here, so you're probably not even really feeling Africans like that. And that's just something that I wanted to point out, because that goes back to why Africa, why Americans now, even though they're the same color and skin tone as Africans, they say they're the same race as Africans, but then you still feel different from Africans. Deep down inside you do. This is because of the fact that you go back to these Olmecs, and a lot of that's in your DNA. So these Olmecs were competitors. Astrologically, we building on a time during the Aryan age, Aries, during the time of Aries. So when you talk about the Aryan Brotherhood, and like you say he's a part of the Aryan Brotherhood, you automatically think he's a racist, but the Aryan Brotherhood goes back to the time of Aries, during the time of the nobles. So the Olmecs, they came during the time of Mars. Mars is ruled by Aries. So they came during the time of Aries, because the Olmecs, they've been coming over here for like thousands of years. They started coming back over here really, their heyday was like really about 3,000 years ago, which puts us into the Aryan time. And the Aryan time is a time of competition and building. And that's what the Olmecs did. They built these rubber colossal heads. Did you know these colossal heads are over 50 tons? Did you know that 50 tons is 100,000 pounds? I was just looking that up. 100,000 pounds. How could these little men build these big old colossal objects? What the hell is going on? What kind of art and what kind of knowledge was they being taught to be able to do that? Can your children do something like that? So we try to downplay the ancients. We try to say we're so much better. We can't even do the stuff they was doing in ancient Aries, though. So if you used to call yourself an American, I don't care what kind of American you call yourself, Irish American, there's millions of Italian American, Polish American, Greek, Jew, whatever, you got to pay homage to the Olmecs. You got to do it because of the fact that the Olmecs, they were the first group of people over here to bring civilization, to bring culture over here, because they came from the West. So they brought exchange over here. So when you call them the people, the rubber people, this means they were alchemists. This means they were well traveled. This means they knew how to get resources from India, Africa, and bring it over to America. This is why you'll find tobacco, I've always used this example, that is indigenous from, say for instance, tobacco that may be indigenous from America, you'll find it over in London. The reason why you'll find, they call it British tobacco. British tobacco is really American tobacco. You can call it that. This is because the Olmecs, they were the first people to start exchanging. They were really the first people to invent what's called a global economy. The concept of it. They may have used ships at the time and water, and they walked over here even. They was walking over here before they could even build ships, because ships, and that came during the time mostly in Pisces, when people start using ships to get places. Back in the time of Aries, see, I'm going into the precession of the equinoxes. You may not understand that, but every 2,160 years we go through a different age. Right now we're ending Pisces, going to Aquarius. But before that, before Pisces, prior to 0 AD, going into BC times, that was during the times of Aries, the Aryan age. And during that time, people walked places. People would walk from I'm talking about from continents to continent, walking because they knew routes and ways. So it's deep. Even Inky and them, when they came over here, that was when Inky and them came over here, that was pre the continental drift. So when you talk about when Inky and them came over here, that was before the continents split apart. So at one time, this was like an island. They called it Turtle Island. And all of the continents were together. But during a period of time, it began to split and split and split and split and split. And if you push the continents back together, you'll notice they fit together perfectly like a jigsaw puzzle. And it was actually where the Atlantic Ocean is. It was more land there. That's where Atlantis was at. But then they had this major earthquake and Atlantis sunk into the water. It's still there. It's just underwater. They have underwater cities going into where that missing flight is probably at, somewhere underwater. So they got a lot going on. You got to study. If you don't understand Olmec history, you can't understand Atlantis. People always ask me, am I going to start a group? Am I going to do this? Am I going to do that? I have to teach you and educate you first before I can invite you into my nation. I have to educate you first, thoroughly. You have to know about astrology thoroughly. You have to know about certain histories that's been supplanted thoroughly. You got to be able to demonstrate this history thoroughly. You must know your connection on a soul level as well as on a DNA level with this history. Because I don't care when you incarnate on this planet, you have to understand the Olmec history and culture, because this is really getting into when we started mixing. So you're not going to understand when we started mixing together and how the culture started mixing, which goes deeply into the Starseed story, because it's all about that. If you're not going to understand any of that if you don't understand the Olmec history, because they were the first group of people, melanated too, that was pro mixing. A lot of people, even to this day, they like, I'm not pro that. We shouldn't mix. We should, everybody should stick to their nationality and mix with their own culture or whatever, and blah blah blah, whoop de whoop de woo. But everything in nature mixes. Everything in nature mixes. This is why you got mutts. Yeah, you have a German Shepherd and you have a Doberman, but they'll mix together because they're attracted sexually. Their hormones, they're going to want to lay down and have sex. So as long as you got people that are function off their hormones, you got to come up with laws on and come up with lands where people want to mix in and live in those lands. If you don't want to live in a land where people mix in, if you're an American, you sound crazy, because if you're an American, you don't have a culture. You don't really have a land, because this whole land is based on people mixing in. So you have to accept something like that being an American. And the only people that may not be for stuff like that are people that still live in tribes. And I can understand that, and that's why they have the tribes. They have a right to live. That's their land. They have a right to govern it the way they want to. But over here, this is how things went. We amalgamated. That's what it's called. We mixed in. This is what we did. So for better or for worse, this is where we're at. And we have to begin to teach our children from that standpoint, knowing that I got ancestors that have blue eyes. You can't look at me and tell, but I got people in my family that's got blonde hair and blue eyes, buddy. And that's just the real deal. That's the way it is over here in this land. So if we want to have peace and develop a culture for this land, we got to study the Olmecs, because that's the culture for this land. Then we can study the Aztecs, because the Olmecs birthed the Aztecs. Then we can study the Iroquois nation, which is what birthed the Constitution. So you got to study all this stuff if you want to understand these things, and you want to get deeper into metaphysics and understanding, on a deeper level about astrology and all that. You got to understand the culture, what was going on during the time of Aries, what was going on during the time of Taurus. So it's one thing to know about astrology, but what was going on during those different seasons. Astrology tells you a story, a star seed story, his story, our story, their story, all in one. So things you gotta know, and things that you have to acknowledge. So I think that's gonna do it for me. My brief little spill on the Olmecs. They're definitely a great group to study. I suggest you research them. I suggest you look more into them. I'm gonna go ahead and shut down for now. For those people that may be interested in knowing which age we're in now, just know we're in the age of Pisces. Is ending. We got about 70 years left before we go into the age of Aquarius, and I've talked about this on other videos. And a lot of people think we're already in the age of Aquarius. We're feeling the energy. We at the door. We can see it. We basically at that part right now where it's like the road trip is almost over. You at the city that you was waiting on. Like when you go on a road trip, you kind of go through various states. You finally get to the state that you're going to, but you still aren't there yet. You're not at your actual city, but you're in the state. So we're in the state of Aquarius, but we're just not at the destination yet. So we still got that Piscean energy. People still need to understand. Right now what needs to happen is that people need to be walked out of, I shouldn't say out of, but people need to be walked into the truths of religion. There's a lot of truth in religion, but there's not a lot of people that can teach it. Because the truth in religion can only be found from people that understand metaphysics. They can be the only ones that can tell the truth about religion. So that's where we're at. We need to explain religion to people, free people from that thinking, so that they can begin to embrace the new energy and the new information and the new transitions that is basically upon us and that we're in. So I hope that helped people to understand some of our culture and history, pre-corporations, pre-HP, Hewlett-Packard, pre-Sony, pre all these corporations. What was going on this land before all of that? We need to understand that so we can have a culture, man. So our children won't just be corporate fictions, That's what I'm here for, just to offer that information. And at some point, maybe turning that into a think tank, an astrological group. So I thank you for listening. I thank you for watching. I'm going to go ahead and get up out of here. Got a busy schedule. Until we meet again, I'll leave you in Hotep, Namaste, peace, love, light, Wadu.